Is LEGO 2K Drive best on the Nintendo Switch, or should you buy it on a more powerful console like PlayStation or Xbox? Well, in today's video, I'll be checking out this brand new open world racing game to find out which version is best for you. LEGO 2K Drive was announced back in March of this year, which makes the initial announcement and release less than 2 months apart, which is a very short window for a game to be marketed. Not that that matters, but it's true. This game was dropped on our laps very soon after it was announced, which means it has been in the works secretly for a few years now. Like my friendships, they like to keep it a secret. The developers wanted this driving game to be like no other, all while retaining the classic LEGO game charm that the LEGO series is known for. As mentioned, LEGO 2K Drive is an open world racing game, which is great because it's more than just racing. There is so much more you can do in this game with the surprising amount of game modes this game has to offer, like online races with friends and random people. There are mini games, individual races, and Cup Series races as well. And of course, there's the story mode, which is my favorite part, and it allows you to travel around different maps completing challenges, side quests, and main races, while going through the story campaign, which is pretty decent. You gain XP and level up your racers so you can compete in new racers throughout the map. But let's dive into the gameplay mechanics. How does it feel? Is the experience enjoyable, or is it like stepping on Lego you forgot on the floor with bare feet? We've all been there, and it's so painful. Fortunately, the gameplay feels great. The drifting mechanics don't feel too touchy, the jump button actually feels useful. The whole Lego aspect makes the game feel better, because a huge part of it is breaking things apart and building cars. As you play the game, you'll notice your vehicle gets chunks taken out of it on impact, and items explode when you crash into them. Please nobody tell my insurance company about this. I can't afford a higher rate. It's cool that your vehicle does take damage because you can repair it by smashing into other objects. If you do too much damage without repairs, then bye-bye car. Speaking of your car, it's more than it seems. It's your on-road vehicle, your off-road vehicle, and your water vehicle. You seamlessly transition through multiple driving styles during a race or when you're exploring one of the maps. This is a feature we've seen in other racing games before, but I like the Lego-ness of it all. It just makes it more fun. Like seriously, it's cool watching your tiny little car turn into a massive monstrosity that you've created in the garage. Speaking of the garage, this is a place where your ideas come to life. Literally anything you can imagine building, you probably can, or at least try to. There is a wide variety of options as a builder, and it is so intricate. You can add fans and technique blocks. I'm not super into the idea of building my own vehicles, but I definitely think it's fun to play around with, and I can see the appeal. And if you weren't sure what you should create, then you can bring an existing design and make it your own by customizing the colors and replacing certain pieces. One downfall, in my opinion, is the unbelievably confusing control scheme in the garage mode. I couldn't wrap my head around how this worked. It felt so random, and I felt lucky when I accidentally did manage to figure it out. I don't want to discourage anyone who's interested in the building part of this. It could just be my lack of understanding. I think it was harder than it felt it should be because of the controller. This would probably be much better and more intuitive on a PC with a mouse and keyboard. When you start this game, you'll most likely jump into the story mode. This is an offline game mode that you can play on the go. This has several maps with a mini open world experience. So it's not a true open world, it's just a bunch of small worlds, but the map feels very large. This is a very unique and fun style of driving game, and one that I never really knew I wanted until now, and I find it extremely fun and addicting. I'm constantly getting distracted by the fun mini games, trying to beat my previous scores, or just simply driving around bashing into objects and doing fun tricks with my vehicles. It's just satisfying, and it has an intriguing gameplay loop that you can easily find yourself losing track of time in, with classic quirky LEGO humor constantly breaking the third wall, which is fitting because it's LEGO. Actually, the gameplay style also really reminds me of games like Riders Republic and the Racing and Hydro Thunder. These are both great vehicle-based racing and exploration games. But of course, with all the good, there's bound to be some bad. Luckily, there's nothing major though, but things like cutscenes which are pretty compressed, most likely because they wanted to reduce the amount of storage the game would take up on the Switch with the pre-rendered videos. And I can't help but notice the handful of weird yet entertaining glitches, like when these figures were floating over this podium. But obviously the most distracting glitches are the game-breaking ones. Glitches that literally make you have to quit the game mode or reset. For example, in the story mode, as I was entering this mission, it just went to this screen, and I was forced to exit the game mode and come back. And then there was a time where I was trying to enter the garage from the main menu, and the game just went completely black. And I couldn't do anything except restart the entire game. Now let's take a look at the graphics, as this is one of the main reasons you're probably considering a different version of the game. First, the resolution. This game seems to run at 720p docked and 480p handheld. LEGO 2K Drive also uses dynamic resolution methods to keep the game running smoothly. So when there's a lot going on, which there very often is, it'll turn the resolution down so the console doesn't burst into flames. But I wouldn't say this is very noticeable. My eyes adjusted to it pretty quickly. Now, if you take a look at the shadows, I'm surprised to say there's a decent amount of shadows on the Switch version. They're a little less clear than their console counterparts. There are dynamic shadows on the player's vehicle and other objects like farm animals. It's mainly in the lighting effects and reflections that we see a big difference between current gen consoles and the Switch. We can also definitely see the difference in the textures, as they are definitely cut back for the Switch version, with a mix of downgraded textures and lower resolution. resolutions. Certain surfaces may look like a blob of clay. The water is most visibly different, with the current gen consoles looking like actual water and not just a sheet of blue. You'll also notice an overall lack of things flying around when you smash into stuff, because I think the developers took some bricks out to save on resources, similar to what we saw in Sonic Frontiers. Like when in Sonic Frontiers, when you would smash into some rocks on the Switch version, only some of the rocks would go tumbling down, whereas on the Steam Deck version, all the rocks would go down. Anyways, it's a similar thing here with the Lego bricks. There's just less bricks, or at least there seems to be less. But I think the biggest difference we see in this game is the halved frame rate, from 60 frames per second on current gen consoles to 30 on here, which might be a deal breaker for some. Now, this isn't a massive deal for most people, and a lot of casual and younger gamers most likely won't realize it until they see the two versions playing side by side. In fact, some may prefer 30 frames per second because it makes the game feel faster in some cases, or at least that's what I keep telling myself. For example, Crash Team Racing made all versions of that game 30 as a stylistic choice, but for most of us, we prefer a smooth 60 frames per second, of course. Thankfully though, it's a somewhat stable 30 frames per second with very minimal frame dips from time to time. Speaking of those frame dips, they're most common in multiplayer, but I'll get back to that. Another thing you may notice is the pop-in and motion blur. The pop-in isn't actually that distracting. You mainly see it when there's an aerial shot with the grass and some textures, but when you're in-game, I didn't realize it very often. And it's nowhere near as bad as Sonic Frontiers was on Switch. One thing that can help with these graphical flaws is the use of motion blur, and we saw this method used very well in Disney Speedstorm on Switch. In 2K Drive, there is a motion blur option, but I can barely notice it on Switch. The motion blur is a lot more prominent on current-gen consoles. What about other aspects of the game, like handheld mode? Because handheld mode may be the biggest reason why you want this game on the Switch. I'm happy to say that handheld mode is great. It feels very similar to how the game is played docked. There's not really any major differences except for the resolution hit I mentioned earlier. In my opinion, it's better to play it in a lower resolution than to not play it handheld at all. I also wanted to quickly mention the audio. The soundtrack is very good, and it's fitting. The game overall sounds very Lego-y. My only complaint is the crushed low-quality sound coming from some of the character voiceovers.
Hot new driver.
That's right, Vicky. Sources say Clutch believes this race.
I don't know if it's just me, but I noticed this on all versions of the game. It just sounds oddly distorted or something. Now let's talk about multiplayer, because multiplayer absolutely shines on Nintendo Switch, more than any other home console. This game can be played split screen the whole way through, even including the story mode, which is fantastic and not something you see in non-Lego games very often. In this split screen multiplayer mode, you'll need to have two full controllers, which means you can't play with split Joy-Cons. The game needs to use either a full pair of Joy-Cons or a Pro controller, and as expected, the game runs at a lower resolution overall and tends to have more frame dips, especially with more going on. It's not unplayable, but it is noticeable. There's actually a multiplayer option exclusive to the Nintendo Switch, but it does require more than one person having a copy of the game. You can actually play local wireless between two Switches without needing an internet connection, or so it seems. Unfortunately, I don't have any friends who also own this game on their Switch to try this out with me, and it's not like an It Takes Two situation where you can download a free multiplayer app on the Switch and play it together that way. Both players need to buy their own copy of the game. With all that being said, you can play this game online, and it's cross-platform too, but not on Switch. In fact, the Switch is the only version of the game that wasn't invited to the party and can't play with other consoles. This is third grade all over again. Switch players are stuck having to play with other Switch players, whereas PlayStation players can play with PC and Xbox players, so that does kind of suck, and may be a determining factor to your platform choice for this game. Hopefully the Switch player base will stick around so finding a match won't become difficult in time. Something that is absolutely crazy about this game is the price. The pricing is simply unreasonable and doesn't make any sense, especially how this game makes use of the microtransactions. Actually, yeah, let me talk about that for a second. The way you buy things in this game is with these coins you pay real money for, which convert into in-game currency called brick bucks. So that's two different currencies to essentially do the same thing. They do this so that unless you want to do lots of math, which nobody ever does, you don't actually realize how much money you're spending. Pretty much every cosmetic in store is bought using these brick bucks. Thankfully, you can get brick bucks by playing the game normally. But some items in the shop are just dramatically overpriced, and they use time-limited sales tactics on the items to try to incentivize people to buy them right away so they don't miss out, which leads to some players paying ridiculous prices for some simple cosmetics, and they aren't even good in my opinion. Nothing here looks worth getting for the most part, except Chicken Band. This whole microtransaction page feels like such a scam, especially after I just spent $100 on the Awesome Edition to get it early to do this video. There's three tiers for this game. The regular tier, which is $60, the Awesome tier, which is a not so awesome price of $100, and the Awesome Rivals Edition at $120. So you can decide which one is right for you. As mentioned, I only bought the Awesome Edition so I could get it early for this video. But it did come with this cool box with an actual Lego set. The Lego set is an exclusive vehicle you get with the Awesome Edition. So that is kind of awesome, but I wouldn't consider it to be $40 worth of awesomeness. You get other in-game cosmetics, but that's what sticks out most about this edition. Actually, there is something that may not be so appealing for the Switch collectors. You know that physical retail copy? See this silly little text right here? Yeah, there's no game cartridge in here at all. It's only a digital download code. But why? I tried digging around to find a reason why, but I cannot figure out the reason behind this. My only guess is that they didn't want to manufacture the cartridges because that tends to be more expensive than discs. But to me, this is a big problem because the physical copy isn't physical anymore. You can't sell it or trade it when you're done with it, and you can't lend it to a friend or family member. The physical appeal is gone. Obviously, it's cool to get this box art, but even though it looks good on your shelf, you're never going to pick it up again because it's an empty box. Oh, and by the way, the Awesome Edition pricing is the same thing physical as it is digital, so if you're planning to get the digital edition of the game, I would just recommend getting the physical one because you still get the digital copy, and you also get a neat little Lego set. And this is only the Switch version. This must be a 2K thing because we've seen other 2K games do this before with their other titles like Borderlands and BioShock. Obviously, you can do whatever you want with your money, but I seriously recommend getting this game when it's on sale because I don't think the full price is warranted for the game yet. Don't get me wrong, it's a great game, just not quite there, especially the expensive Awesome Editions. Back to the main question, is it best on Switch? Well, it depends what kind of gamer you are. If you don't care about graphics and you like to play handheld, then absolutely it is. But if you want to experience this game in high resolution with a higher frame rate and expect to play cross-platform with some friends that aren't Switch users, then maybe get it on a current or heck, even previous gen console because it's available for those too. But let me know, are you going to grab this game? And if you do, will you get it on the Switch? Also, if you want to watch me play through the first 30 minutes on the Switch, check out my second channel, Russ Plays Normal Mode. Please go subscribe to that channel. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subs as soon as possible. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I hope to see you in the next one. See you later.